We've all been there, right? You're in the
Yeah.
back of a car, you try to read a text message, and then boom,
Oh, yeah.
that awful familiar wave just hits you, your hands get clammy, your stomach drops. It's just immediate.
It is. It's that instant feeling of dread. And what's so wild is that it isn't just you being sensitive. It's actually a deeply wired protective reflex. It's your brain getting confused.
Exactly. And that confusion is what we're doing a deep dive on today. We're going into the science to really understand motion sickness.
Yeah.
We're talking about the mechanisms, the personal risk factors like genetics, and how new tech like VR and self-driving cars is changing everything.
Right. Our mission here is to figure out why your brain sometimes treats being a passenger like a full-blown medical emergency. And the best place to start is with the main explanation for all this.
The sensory conflict theory.
Sensory conflict theory.
I love this because it frames it not as a weakness, but as a communication breakdown inside your own head. So what's the brain trying to say, and why is this signal getting so scrambled?
Well, the theory, SCT for short, says your brain is always building an internal model. It's like a central expectation of how motion should feel based on everything you've ever done.
Yeah.
Sickness happens when the data coming in from your senses, your eyes, your inner ear, just doesn't line up with that expectation. It's a mismatch.
So it's like your brain's internal GPS is telling you you're on a smooth highway, but the compass and the map are screaming that you're actually on a rocky back road.
That is a perfect analogy. Imagine you're on a train reading. Your eyes are telling your brain, hey, we're sitting still, the book isn't moving.
Right, everything looks stationary.
But your inner ear, your vestibular system, it feels the bumps, the acceleration, the turns, and it's shouting, wait a minute, we are definitely moving. That contradiction is the core trigger.
Okay, so let's get into the hardware, the vestibular system. This is really the star of the show when it comes to this confusion. What are the key parts in there?
It's basically your body's built-in gyroscope. And it has two main components sending data to your brain. First, you have the semicircular canals. They're these little fluid-filled loops, and they detect angular motion. So turning your head, taking a corner in a car, that kind of thing. They handle rotation.
And what about just moving in a straight line, like when a car speeds up?
That's the job of the otolith organs. These things have tiny little crystals inside that shift with inertia, so they detect linear acceleration and also gravity. Speeding up, going up a hill, that's what they report.
And when the signals from those canals and those otoliths just totally defy what your eyes are seeing.
That's when the brain hits the big red panic button.
So there's a conflict, but where does the brain actually process this signal? I mean, is there a literal sickness generator in there somewhere?
There is. The central hub for this is deep in the brainstem. The structure that really generates the signal is called the velocity storage integrator.
Wow.
It's inside the vestibular nuclei, and it works with a part of the cerebellum to try and make sense of all the motion data. When it just can't reconcile the inputs, it sends out the error signal that we feel as sickness.
And this isn't just a theory. I mean, scientists have actually validated this, right? They've proved the sensory conflict causes the symptoms.
Oh, absolutely. They used a technique called galvanic vestibular stimulation, GVS, to test it. It basically lets them use a tiny electrical current to trick the inner ear, to create a specific sensory conflict on demand.
So what did they find when they did that?
They found direct causal evidence. When they tweaked the experiment to minimize the sensory conflict, they saw a really significant, a 26% reduction in sickness.
26%, wow.
But when they cranked the conflict up to the maximum, they saw a massive 56% increase in symptoms. It shows we can actually quantify the confusion.
That's incredible. So the brain's alarm is blaring.
Mm-hmm.
But how does that neurological signal translate into the physical misery, the sweating, the stomach churning? What chemicals are responsible?
That's the next step in the chain, the chemical pathways. As soon as the brain logs that mismatch, it activates three main neurotransmitter systems:
What are?
histamine, acetylcholine, and noradrenaline.
Histamine. I always just think of allergies. Why is that the main one for nausea?
It plays a really unique role here. The histaminergic system in the hypothalamus fires up, and it sends signals that directly stimulate H1 receptors in the brainstem's emetic center.
Emetic center. So that's literally the nausea zone.
That's the nausea zone. And what's important, and you kind of touched on this, is that this pathway is totally independent of the dopamine and serotonin receptors that are involved in other kinds of vomiting.
Like from food poisoning or something.
Exactly. It's why you need different kinds of medicine for motion sickness.
And I know recent brain imaging shows it's not just the primitive brainstem going haywire. higher level parts of the brain are getting involved too, right?
Yes, absolutely. fMRI scans showed the mid-cingulate cortex lighting up. That's an area involved in resolving conflict. It's desperately trying to make sense of the bad data. And the precuneus gets involved too, which is all about your sense of self in space.
So your whole sense of where you are in the world is being challenged, and your brain is scrambling to fix it.
The whole system is engaged.
Which brings us to the really interesting part for me, the wow factors. Why does this hit people so differently? Why am I sick on a boat when you're totally fine?
It's so individualized, and the variation really comes down to three things: age, sex, and genetics. Let's start with age, because the curve is just astonishing.
Okay.
Motion sickness is almost unheard of in infants, anyone under 2. But then it just skyrockets, and it peaks between ages 7 and 12.
The elementary school bus zone of misery. I remember it well.
That's exactly it. Some studies show that around 40% of children in that age range get motion sick in cars or buses. It's almost half of them.
40%. And then what happens?
Thankfully, it starts to decline through adulthood. And the main reason for that is believed to be habituation.
Just getting used to it.
Your adult brain has just had more time, more exposure to update its internal model. It learns to expect the mismatch, so it's not such an alarm anymore.
Okay, let's talk about the difference between men and women. The data consistently shows women are more susceptible. Is that a real biological thing?
It is, 100%. And it's tied directly to hormonal cycles. We see a significant increase in susceptibility during phases of elevated estrogen.
Really?
Yes, it peaks right around ovulation, about day 12 of the menstrual cycle. They confirm this with salivary hormone tests. And of course, pregnancy also dramatically increases the risk. It's a very strong link.
So it's not just about a boat rocking. This is tied to our fundamental biology, our genetics. How heritable is it?
It's incredibly heritable. Twin studies put the number somewhere between 57 and 70%. It's a highly genetic trait.
That's huge. Have scientists actually found the specific genes responsible?
They're getting there. A huge genome-wide association study, a GWS, identified 35 specific little variations in DNA, they're called SNPs, that are linked to motion sickness.
And what do those genes do?
They're mostly near genes that are involved in, balance, ear development, eye development, things like that. It all makes sense. And to your earlier point about sex differences, some of these genetic effects were found to be up to 3 times stronger in women.
3 times stronger. Wow. That provides a real molecular reason for what we've always observed.
It does, and it's also worth noting that there's a huge overlap with other conditions. About 50% of people who get motion sick also fit the criteria for vestibular migraine.
That is just staggering. It suggests a shared pathway for dizziness and sickness. Okay, let's pivot to the future.
Yeah.
Because this all becomes so important with 2 huge technologies, VR and self-driving cars.
The new frontiers of sensory conflict. In virtual reality, you get something called visually induced motion sickness, or VIMS.
And cybersickness.
Exactly.
Wow.
And in VR, you get the classic visual vestibular conflict, but you also get a new one, the accommodation vergence conflict.
Okay, what's that?
It's a problem with near-eye displays. Basically, your eyes are trying to focus on a screen that's optically far away, but they have to converge as if it's very close. That mismatch, focusing at one distance while converging at another, adds a whole new layer of confusion for the brain.
And there's a weird paradox in VR design, isn't there? Where trying to make it better actually makes us sicker.
There is. Everyone wants a wider field of view for more immersion. But a wider field of view makes VIMS much worse.
Why is that?
Because your peripheral vision is hypersensitive to motion and lag. So the more you see in your periphery, the more your brain picks up on tiny mismatches that scream, something is wrong here.
And then we have autonomous vehicles. The promise is that we'll all become passengers, free to read or work or watch movies. But that sounds like a recipe for, well, universal motion sickness.
It's a huge concern for the industry. The prevalence of motion sickness is expected to go way up as we become passengers instead of drivers. We'll be looking down at screens while the car is turning and accelerating. It's a perfect storm.
So what's the solution? We can't just not have self-driving cars.
The solution is personalization. Engineers are using those computational models we talked about to build personalized motion sickness profiles.
What does that mean in practice? How would my car know not to make me sick?
Well, the model could learn your specific profile, maybe from an initial ride or even your genetic data one day. It learns that you get sick with accelerations over a certain threshold.
Okay, okay.
So the autonomous system then adjusts its driving style for you. It takes smoother turns, it limits harsh acceleration, it keeps the movements inside your personal comfort zone. The ride is literally optimized for your brain.
That's amazing. Okay, so moving from predicting it to actually treating it. What's the best we have today? What's the pharmacological gold standard?
The gold standard for a long time has been scopolamine. It's an anticholinergic drug, usually in a patch you put behind your ear. It's very effective at reducing the feeling of nausea.
But there's a catch, right?
That
I
just
seem to remember it's not a perfect solution.
There is a big catch. While it's great for nausea, it doesn't actually reduce the incidence of vomiting. And more importantly, it can interfere with long-term habituation. It basically blocks the signals the brain needs to learn and adapt.
So it's a short-term fix that prevents your brain from finding a long-term one. What's on the horizon? What's the next big thing in medication?
That would probably be a new drug called tradipitant. It's what's known as an NK1 receptor antagonist. So instead of targeting the same system as scopolamine, it targets receptors that are all over the brainstem's vomiting center. It's a different mechanism.
And have the trials been promising?
Very promising. There is a big trial called Motion Cyros with hundreds of people on actual boat trips. They found it significantly cut down on vomiting. Only about 14% of people on the drug got sick compared to over 30% on the placebo.
That's a huge difference.
It is. It's an exciting new pathway for treatment.
Okay, but what if you want to avoid drugs altogether? What are the most effective, research-backed, non-drug strategies?
The single best long-term solution with zero side effects is just habituation. It's repeated, controlled exposure. You are literally training your brain to update its internal model until the new reality becomes the expected reality.
It takes time, but it's a permanent fix.
It is. For in-the-moment fixes, the best thing you can do is maintain a horizon view. It gives your eyes a stable reference point and immediately reduces that visual vestibular conflict.
And avoid looking at your phone.
Absolutely. And another one that's surprisingly effective is controlled breathing. Deep, slow breathing. Studies show it can be about half as effective as medication with no side effects at all.
What about the classic one, ginger? Does the science actually back that up?
It does, for the most part. The evidence can be a little mixed, but several good controlled trials show that taking 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams of ginger before travel can significantly reduce nausea.
How does it work?
It's thought to work directly on the stomach, preventing the irregular muscle contractions that lead to nausea, and it also seems to suppress a hormone called vasopressin.
And what about things like acupressure bands?
Those bands and a similar technology called TEAS, which uses a mild electrical pulse, are good drug-free options. We're still figuring out exactly how they work, but many people find relief, and since there are no side effects, they're a great first thing to try.
So to bring this all together, what we've learned is that motion sickness isn't a weakness. It is a quantifiable neurological conflict.
And we know that your personal susceptibility is incredibly specific to you based on your genes, which could be up to 70% heritable, and even your hormones, like estrogen.
And the really big takeaway here is that the whole field is moving toward personalization.
Absolutely. We're moving away from one-size-fits-all patches and toward a future where our cars and our VR headsets can actually model our individual brains to keep us comfortable.
Which leaves us with a final thought. If we can literally train our brains to adapt to the sensory chaos of a ship or a self-driving car, what other involuntary responses, things like chronic pain or maybe even anxiety, could we learn to override with the right kind of training and the right sensory inputs?
A really profound question about just how adaptable we really are. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
If you enjoyed this trip into the science of human balance, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our next exploration.